Picture this. You are 12 years old, a boy in a small Bulgarian village in the year 1550. Morning mist clings to the valley like a white shroud, muffling the world in silence. The smell of damp earth and sheep's wool is familiar, comforting, as you walk beside your father among the flock. The soft clinking of the bells tied to their necks has always been the rhythm of your life. Behind you, your mother tends the hearth, baking bread that fills the air with warmth, while a clay jug of goat's milk waits on the table. In that instant, everything feels whole, secure, as if the day will pass like countless others before it. But then it comes, the thunder of hooves striking against the cobblestone path. The sound does not belong here. It is alien, heavy with menace. Your father's face drains of colour until he is as pale as parchment. Your mother drops the clay pitcher she was holding, and it shatters across the floor in shards. She doesn't even bend to pick it up. Everyone in the village knows what those hoofbeats mean. The Sultan's collectors have arrived. You crouch behind a wooden cart, heart pounding, as Ottoman officials dismount their horses. Their silk robes gleam despite the long road they've travelled. Their boots bear no mud, no dust, as though the empire itself shields them from dirt. In their hands are scrolls and lists, the records of villages like yours, and in their eyes, the cold calculation of merchants examining livestock. They do not see children, they see future servants, soldiers, and ornaments of the empire. One official raises his hand and points. His finger finds you. The world goes silent, except for your mother's cry. She collapses to her knees, clawing at the hem of the man's robe, begging in a language they do not care to understand. Her words spill out like broken glass, frantic, desperate, but they wash over the officials like rain on stone. Your father stands frozen, his jaw clenched, saying nothing. He knows what every father in these valleys knows. Resistance means death, not just for himself, but for the entire family, and so they take you. Your mother's arms claw around your waist. Your father's hands grip your shoulders for one last trembling second. Then you're ripped away. The men tell you this is an honor, that you will serve the Sultan, that you may rise to greatness. Their voices are calm, smooth, rehearsed, like priests performing a sacred ritual. But no words can soothe the truth. As the cart rolls away, carrying you and other boys from the village, you hear your mother's sobs fade into the distance until they dissolve into the mist. You will never see her again. This is the beginning of your new life. Not as a son, not as a villager, but as a palace boy. A gulm, a child swept into the Ottoman machine. What awaited you inside the Sultan's palace would make you long for the simple days of sheep in the valley, when the only sound was the song of bells drifting through the mist. To the Ottomans, this practice had a name: Devshirme, the collection. For nearly 2 centuries, officials swept through Christian villages across the Balkans, taking the strongest, brightest boys between the ages of 8 and 15. To the empire, this was recruitment. To the families, it was kidnapping. Historians debate how often it happened. Some say every 5 years, others less frequently. But in every village, the fear was constant. Mothers lived in dread that the knock on the door would come, that their sons' names would be written on the lists, that their households would be broken. Fathers knew no plea could protect them. The empire saw these boys as raw material, destined to be reshaped into Janissaries, soldiers, administrators, and palace servants. To the villagers, it was nothing less than the theft of their blood. There are accounts of priests who tried to hide boys inside church cellars, of families smuggling their children into the forests, of desperate parents bribing minor officials with coins, livestock, or even their daughters' hands in marriage. Sometimes it worked. Often it did not. You were not so lucky. The wheels of the cart creak beneath you. The horses snort. Around you, other boys sit stiff and silent, some biting their lips until they bleed, some trembling so hard the wood beneath them shakes. They are all strangers, but in their eyes you see your own terror reflected back at you. The Empire tells you this is opportunity. But in that moment, staring back at the shrinking outline of your village, you know the truth. It is the end of your childhood. The cart jolts forward, and with it begins the first lesson of your new life under the Sultan. Survival has no room for weakness. For weeks, you and dozens of other boys are driven across rugged terrain. The nights are bitter, the ground hard, and the food meager. Coarse bread, watered gruel, sometimes nothing at all. When it rains, the guards do not stop. You march soaked to the bone, mud caking your legs, shivering until your teeth chatter. When the sun blazes, the dust burns in your throat until every breath feels like swallowing ash. Some boys stumble, some fall. Those who cannot rise again are left by the roadside like broken animals. You learn quickly to avert your eyes, to keep moving. The lesson is merciless but clear. The Empire has no use for the weak. Beside you walks a boy older than you, perhaps 14, with eyes the color of the sea. His name is Nikos, taken from a Greek fishing village. He whispers it to you one night when the guards are far enough not to hear. Then he warns you. It won't be mine for long. Soon they will forbid it. His voice is quiet, not angry, simply resigned. On the third night, Nikos tries to flee. He slips from the line under cover of darkness, his bare feet barely whispering against the earth. For a moment, you dare to hope he might make it. But the guards catch him before he has gone a mile. They drag him back, their faces expressionless, and beat him in front of everyone. His screams tear across the countryside. You squeeze your eyes shut, pressing your palms against your ears, but the sound burrows into your skull. The guards do not kill him. They want you all to see what happens to boys who run. By dawn, Nikos staggers back into the line, his face swollen and purple, his body broken. He does not look at you again. He does not speak. His silence is heavier than his screams. From that night on, you learn to walk like a shadow, to keep your head down, your voice still, your body invisible. Survival demands it. The road to Istanbul was not only a physical ordeal, but also a psychological crucible. Historians who studied these marches describe them as a process of unmaking, stripping the boys of the identities they carried from their homes, grinding them down until nothing remained but pliable clay ready to be reshaped. The Ottomans were skilled at this. They had refined the devşirme system into a ritual of transformation. Travelers' records from the Balkans tell of mothers chasing after the columns of boys until their feet bled, hurling curses at the guards or begging to take their children's place. Others describe silence, villages standing motionless as the boys disappeared over the horizon, knowing that protest was futile, that survival demanded submission. Some officials claimed the march was a kindness, a preparation for the discipline of palace life. In truth, it was a test of endurance designed to divide the living from the dying. Weeks later, the landscape begins to change. Hills give way to flatlands, fields to the sprawl of settlements. One morning, you crest a ridge, and there it is, the skyline of Istanbul. It should be magnificent. Minarets pierce the sky like spears of stone. The massive dome of Hagia Sophia looms above the city, shimmering in the sun. The Bosporus glitters with ships, sails taut with wind. And above all, sprawled across a great promontory, lies the palace of Topkapı, the center of the Ottoman world, gleaming like a jewel in the morning light. But instead of awe, a stone of dread settles in your stomach. You do not see splendor. You see prison walls rising to swallow you whole. The air smells of salt, incense, and roasting meat. The streets thunder with the voices of merchants, the creak of wagons, the bray of donkeys. But you barely hear any of it. Your legs tremble. You clutch the edge of the cart, the world tilting around you, and all you can think is, this city is not my home. To the empire, it is the heart of power. To you, it is the end of everything you were. The gates of Istanbul swallow you whole. After weeks on the road, you're herded into a courtyard along with the other survivors. The air is thick with incense and sweat, the voices of the city echoing faintly beyond the palace walls. This is your first taste of the Ottoman capital, and it feels less like a welcome than a judgment. Ottoman officials wait for you, scrolls in hand. They wear fine kaftans, embroidered with gold thread, their eyes sharp, their movements practiced. These men are not soldiers, yet their presence weighs heavier than steel. They are here to sort you, to decide where your life will lead. The process begins. One by one, boys are brought forward. Teeth are pried open and inspected as though you were horses at a market. Hands are stretched out, muscles pinched, legs measured. They test your reflexes with sudden strikes, demand you recite numbers or letters, ask if you can read or sing. They circle you slowly, like art collectors studying a statue, looking for symmetry, for beauty, for strength. You see boys stripped bare, their skin checked for scars or blemishes, their hair tugged, their faces tilted toward the light. Some officials murmur approval. Others shake their heads, dismissing a child with a flick of the wrist. The outcomes vary, and each feels like a sentence. The strongest, fiercest boys are marked for the Janissary Corps, the empire's elite soldiers, feared across Europe, bound only to the Sultan. Others are deemed fit for labor, destined for farms, kitchens, or workshops. But then there is the highest tier, and the most dangerous. The most beautiful, intelligent, and promising are chosen for the palace school, the Enderun. That is where they place you. An official points to your bright eyes, your unblemished skin, the sharpness of your answers. He smiles, but it is not a kind smile. It is the smile of a hunter who has found worthy prey. You do not yet understand the weight of his choice, but you feel the unease coil in your stomach. Historians often describe the Enderun school as the first institutional education for the gifted. And in one sense, it was. Within the palace walls, boys would study languages, Arabic, Persian, Turkish. They would learn mathematics, astronomy, music, literature, calligraphy, and even military strategy. The empire prided itself on this education, presenting it as a forge that turned ordinary children into extraordinary men. But this polished description conceals the darker truth. The palace was not simply a school. It was a crucible of obedience, a machine designed to break boys down and rebuild them as instruments of imperial power. Education was inseparable from indoctrination, brilliance bound tightly with submission. The Ottoman chroniclers spoke of opportunity. European travelers spoke of cruelty. A Venetian ambassador once wrote of boys in the palace, chosen as if for beauty alone, kept like jewels, their talents cultivated only in service to the Sultan. His words, veiled in diplomacy, hinted at what he dared not say plainly, that these children were commodities as much as students. When your turn comes, your heart pounds so hard you think they must hear it. An official grips your chin, turning your face to the light. Another examines your teeth, nodding. A third asks you to repeat a short phrase in Turkish. Your tongue stumbles, but your effort earns approving murmurs. Finally, they mark your name. Your fate is sealed. You will not be sent to the battlefield, nor to a workshop or stable. You will live within the marble walls of the Sultan's palace. To the villagers you left behind, it would sound like fortune. To you, it feels like being led into a gilded cage. You are escorted away with a handful of other boys, your new companions in captivity. Ahead lies Topkapı, a labyrinth of chambers and courtyards, silken halls that gleam in the sun like they were touched by God himself. But you already sense the truth. Beauty here is not a gift. It is a weapon. As the gates close behind you, the city's roar fades. The last breath of freedom is gone. Inside, your life as a palace boy begins. The first thing you notice is the silence. After weeks of marching, the chaos of the road, the cries of mothers, and the groans of boys collapsing in the dirt, the silence of the palace feels suffocating. The sound of your own footsteps against polished marble seems almost too loud, as though every move is being watched. And in truth, it is. They lead you into the dormitory, a vast hall lined with narrow beds, each covered in silk sheets that shimmer under lamplight. At first glance, it looks magnificent. But as you lie down that first night, you realize the truth. The silk does not comfort you. It binds you like invisible chains. You are not a guest here. You are property. All around you, boys whisper in dozens of tongues. Greek, Serbian, Albanian, Bulgarian, voices trembling with homesickness, trying to smother their sobs into pillows. Some murmur prayers in the languages of their mothers, while others sit staring blankly at the ceiling as though already hollowed out. You clutch the one thing you have left, a small wooden cross, pressed into your hand by your mother when the collectors came. You hold it tightly against your chest, the wood warm from your skin, as though it might shield you from the palace walls. By morning, it is gone, discovered, confiscated. In its place, they give you a new name, Mehmet. Your Christian origins, your old village name, the language of your family. All of it is stripped away. You are told to forget, and the threat in their voices makes it clear. Forgetting is not optional. The conversion ceremony is performed with grandeur, as though this were a celebration rather than an erasure. You are bathed, dressed in clean linen, and led before officials who recite verses in Arabic. They speak of faith, of honor, of destiny. You repeat the words they command, your mouth forming syllables you do not understand. To outsiders, it looks voluntary, a boy stepping forward into the embrace of a great empire. But you know, and every boy there knows, that choice has nothing to do with it. This is survival dressed in ritual. Historians note that such ceremonies were as much performance as they were religion. A display meant to convince the empire and the world that this system was just. For the boys themselves, it was the severing of identity. Each lost name, each discarded object, each forced word was another cut in the rope that once tied them to their homes. That first night after your conversion, the palace reveals its unspoken rules. A boy older than you, perhaps 15, his eyes sharp with knowledge you do not yet have, passes your bed. He does not speak, but the way he glances at you is enough. You realize there are hierarchies here, invisible ladders that stretch upward into both privilege and danger. The eunuchs enforce order, moving through the halls with quiet authority. Their bodies bear the marks of violence inflicted on them long ago, but their power over you is absolute. They control your food, your punishments, your access to even the smallest freedom. Some carry themselves with the rigid cruelty of men who were broken and now choose to break others. At night, when the lamps are dimmed, you hear footsteps. Older boys slip between beds, whispers exchanged, breaths quickening. You do not yet understand the full meaning of these sounds, but you feel the dread of it in your stomach. Here, advancement depends on pleasing superiors, and pleasing can mean many things no child should have to learn. The palace itself feels like a maze. Marble corridors stretch endlessly, ornate chambers shimmer with gold and tile, and hidden passages whisper with secrets. It is beautiful, yes, but it is also inescapable. The walls themselves seem designed to remind you. You belong to the Sultan now. Everywhere, the weight of surveillance presses down. You learn quickly that eyes are always watching. Laughter is dangerous. Speaking your old tongue is dangerous. Even standing too long in thought is dangerous. You are to obey, to study, to serve, and above all, to remain silent. By the end of your first week, the boy who arrived clutching a wooden cross and a mother's lullabies already feels like someone else. You stare at your reflection in the polished brass of a water basin, and for a moment, you do not recognize the boy looking back. You are not a villager's son anymore. You are an Ottoman servant in training, and the price of survival here is forgetting who you once were. It does not take long before someone notices you. One evening, after prayers, as the dormitory settles into a tense hush, an older boy drifts toward your bed. His name is Amit. He has been here 3 years, long enough to carry himself with the swagger of someone who understands the system, and long enough to wear the scars of it. He sits on the edge of your mattress uninvited. His voice is soft, almost kind, but carries an undercurrent of command. "You're new," he says, his dark eyes fixed on yours. "You don't understand how things work here yet, but I can protect you, teach you, help you advance." For a moment, you almost believe him. You want to. To have someone explain the rules, to guide you through the maze, would be a comfort. But then he lets his hand rest on your shoulder, heavy, lingering. You freeze. In return, Amit whispers, his voice dropping lower, "You'll need to show gratitude. There are ways younger boys can thank their elders, ways that stay between us." The air seems to vanish from the room. You are 12 years old. No stranger has ever touched you this way. Every muscle in your body screams to pull away, but your mind hesitates. You've already seen what happens to boys who defy the order of things. Resistance is punished, sometimes violently. Refusal means isolation, beatings, humiliation. Acceptance means surrendering what little remains of your childhood. This is the choice thousands of boys before you have faced. A choice that is no choice at all. Historians today call it systematic grooming, but inside the palace, it was simply the air everyone breathed. Older students, once victims themselves, perpetuated the cycle. Eunuchs, who had been mutilated in their youth, wielded their authority with a mix of bitterness and cruelty. Palace officials, men of power, selected the most beautiful boys openly, without shame, as if it were as natural as choosing a falcon for the hunt. The structure itself encouraged this predation. Advancement was tied not only to intelligence or obedience, but to one's ability to please superiors. And pleasing could mean anything: a clever poem, a flawless recitation, or something whispered in dark corners after the lamps went out. You watch how others navigate this twisted game. Some boys learn quickly to use their beauty as currency. They smile, they charm, they accept advances with a calculated grace. Their lives become easier: better food, fine clothing, private tutors. They are envied by some, pitied by others. But when you look into their eyes, you see only hollowness. Whatever innocence they once had has been bartered away. Others take the opposite path, resisting everything. They endure the punishments, the isolation, the endless humiliations. Slowly, they wither. Their voices grow faint, their bodies gaunt. They become shadows moving silently through the halls until one morning their beds are empty and no one speaks their name again. You, like so many others, try to walk the line between. To endure enough to survive, but not so much that you are consumed. But the palace was designed to make such balance impossible. Every day forces new decisions, each one chiseling away another piece of who you once were. What makes this system so insidious is how thoroughly it was normalized. Sexual exploitation was not a shameful secret. It was woven into the fabric of palace life. European envoys, their reports laced with unease, noted how boys moved through the palace halls like living ornaments, dressed in silks, their presence both decorative and servile. The Ottomans themselves spoke of loyalty, of discipline, of service, never of what was sacrificed to achieve it. To the empire, these were not children. They were clay, molded for beauty, for service, for power. And to boys like you, Ahmed's smile was not just a warning. It was a prophecy. For if you survived long enough, one day you too might wear that same smile. The smile of a predator who had once been prey. Life in the palace soon revealed itself for what it truly was. Not an education, but a slow breaking. The days began before dawn, when eunuchs stormed the dormitory, their voices like whips. You were shaken awake, ordered to prayers you had been forced to memorize in a language that still felt foreign on your tongue. Breakfast was given at precise intervals. Plain bread, a thin broth, just enough to sustain, never enough to comfort. Every moment of your day was scheduled. Study, chores, drills, more prayers, endless lessons. There was no time to think of home. No time to remember who you were. Any attempt to hold on to your old self was met with brutal correction. You saw this in the boy named Milos. One morning, he was caught whispering a prayer in the manner of his Christian faith. The punishment was swift. He was stripped naked and forced to stand in the courtyard for hours, while other boys were encouraged to mock him. You remember his skin burning under the midday sun, his eyes staring at the ground, and the laughter of children who mocked not because they wanted to, but because to remain silent would mark them next. The lesson was clear. Your old life was not just gone, it was shameful. Discipline in the palace was designed to humiliate, to bend the spirit before it broke the body. A misstep in lessons might mean being beaten with rods. Speaking your native language could earn you solitary confinement in a chamber barely large enough to lie down in. Even displaying sadness, too much silence, too much longing, was dangerous. The eunuchs called it laziness, rebellion, weakness. And weakness could not be tolerated. What you did not know then, what historians recognize now, is that this was a carefully crafted system of psychological conditioning. By punishing not only disobedience, but memory itself, the palace sought to erase your former identity and replace it with one molded entirely by the empire. Even visitors from outside the empire glimpsed the cruelty. A Venetian ambassador in the 16th century wrote with unease about the way young boys were treated inside the palace. Examined for beauty, displayed in silk, their innocence turned into ornament. A century later, a French diplomat described a reception where he saw boys as young as 10 moving through the halls like bright birds in gilded cages, their eyes downcast, their bodies adorned for display. He noted the fear in their eyes whenever an older official approached. These accounts, filtered through European prejudice, still could not disguise the truth. The abuse was systemic, structured, and accepted, and yet, alongside the breaking came a different kind of instruction. You studied languages, calligraphy, the sciences. You were drilled in etiquette until you could bow, pour wine, or recite poetry with mechanical precision. They gave you knowledge, yes, but knowledge braided with servitude. It was the cruelest paradox. The very men who expanded your mind also violated your humanity. The very system that gave you skills stripped you of self. The palace taught you astronomy, but forbade you to look up at the stars and remember your father's voice telling you their names. The worst was not the punishments or even the constant fear. It was the silence of nights. Lying in your bed, eyes open in the darkness, you could hear the muffled sobs of boys trying to bury their grief in pillows, the footsteps of older students moving between beds, the whispers that made your skin crawl. You clutched your thin blanket, wishing it could shield you not from cold, but from the eyes that watched, the hands that reached, the unspoken rules that turned children into currency. You were no longer a son, no longer a villager, no longer yourself. You were being remade, piece by piece, into something the empire desired. A servant polished on the outside, hollowed on the inside. By now, you had learned the rules of the palace: obey, smile, and endure. But no matter how you tried to navigate, the palace gave you only two choices: break or bend until you became something unrecognizable. Around you, the fates of other boys unfolded like cautionary tales. There was Dmitri, taken from a village not far from your own. At first, he was like you, frightened, clinging to scraps of memory. But within months, his strategy changed. He learned to laugh at the right moments, to flatter the right officials, to smile in ways that pleased. He accepted the advances of older students, even sought them out when it brought him protection. Soon, he had better food, finer clothing, and even private lessons. From the outside, it looked like success. But when you met his eyes, there was nothing left behind them. No warmth, no remembrance of family. He had traded his past for survival, and survival had hollowed him. And then there was Stephanos, a fisherman's son from Greece. He resisted everything. He refused to bend, refused to smile, refused to accept the hands that reached for him. The price was endless punishment. He grew thinner each week, his face gaunt, his eyes distant. He performed his tasks like a ghost, silent and automatic. One morning his bed was empty. No one asked where he had gone. No one dared speak his name again. In the palace, disappearance was as final as death. You watched them both, the boy who surrendered everything to survive, and the boy who resisted until he vanished. And you realized the cruelty of the system. There was no good path. Whatever choice you made, something essential would be destroyed. The palace had its own economy, a hierarchy not of money, but of favors and privilege. A softer bed, sweeter food, access to books or instruments, all could be bought, not with coins, but with obedience, submission, and silence. You learned to navigate this economy carefully. Sometimes you helped older students with their studies, buying a little protection. Sometimes you feigned enthusiasm, earning a teacher's notice. Tiny strategies, calculated risks, all to carve out enough safety to survive another day. But always, the cost was another piece of yourself. Escape was a dream whispered in secret, but the palace made it nearly impossible. Surrounded by walls and water, guarded at every passage, there was nowhere to run. Still, a few tried. You remember the boy who leapt into the Bosporus, thinking he could swim to freedom. He was dragged back half-drowned, beaten so savagely that he could barely walk. They paraded his broken body before all of you, a living warning. He survived, but he was never whole again. He shuffled through the halls with vacant eyes, a reminder that resistance meant ruin. Even those few who managed to flee rarely found salvation. Their names had been erased, their faith changed, their childhood stolen. Families might not recognize them. Villages might reject them. What skills did they have beyond what the palace had drilled into them? They belonged nowhere anymore. Freedom itself had become a foreign country, so you learned what the palace wanted you to learn. Compromise. A smile when you wished to cry. Obedience when your heart longed to resist. Silence when you wanted to scream. It was not survival in the true sense. It was survival as the palace defined it. Living with a body intact, but a spirit reshaped. And as the years passed, you began to understand the most terrifying truth of all. If you endured long enough, you risked becoming exactly like the ones who once preyed upon you. The years pass, and with them, the boy who once clutched a wooden cross and cried himself to sleep disappears. In his place stands a young man, fluent in Turkish, Arabic, and Persian, skilled in mathematics and astronomy, trained in diplomacy, poetry, music, and war. On the surface, he is a triumph of the Sultan system, a jewel polished to perfection, but inside, he is a ruin. The palace has done what it was designed to do. It has erased one identity and built another. You are no longer the child from a misty valley. You are Mehmet now, servant of the empire, a tool shaped for imperial glory. Your survival has come at a cost you cannot measure. Innocence traded for advancement, memories buried beneath discipline, humanity reshaped into obedience. The day of Chukma, the graduation, arrives. It is meant to be a celebration. One by one, you and the other boys, now young men, are assigned roles. Some are placed into the Janissary corps, others into imperial administration. A select few remain in the palace itself, climbing closer to the Sultan's inner circle. You stand tall, bowing with perfect form, your voice steady as you recite the words demanded of you. To the officials, you are the product of success, disciplined, brilliant, loyal. But only you know the truth. Every polished word is built on years of fear. Every graceful gesture hides the scars no one speaks of. Historians have often praised the endurance system for producing some of the most capable administrators and generals of the Ottoman Empire. Men who rose from obscurity to wield immense power, viziers, governors, commanders who shaped the empire's destiny. Ottoman chroniclers describe the school as a crucible of discipline, a place where loyalty and brilliance were forged together, but they rarely spoke of the cost. Because behind every polished official was a boy torn from his family. Behind every loyal vizier was a child who had once cried in the night. Behind every man who commanded armies stood the ghost of a 12-year-old, forced to choose between submission and destruction, and so the cycle continued. The boys who survived long enough to become men often perpetuated the same system that had once consumed them. Some became predators themselves, their smiles reflecting the same hunger you had once feared in a meat. Others enforced the discipline ruthlessly, punishing resistance in new generations just as it had been punished in them. For some, it was easier to become the hunter than to remain forever the prey. You realize with horror that this was the empire's greatest victory, not just in training loyal servants, but in convincing the victims to sustain the system themselves. Centuries later, the palace still stands. Today, tourists wander through Topkapı, marveling at the tiled chambers, the glittering mosaics, the treasures displayed behind glass. They listen to guides speak of the palace school's brilliance, its innovations in education, its role in shaping the empire. They admire the beauty of the halls, the order of the courtyards, but the walls do not speak of what happened within them. They do not tell of boys like you, children who wept into their pillows, who lost their names, who learned to smile while their souls crumbled. They do not tell of Dimitri's hollow eyes, or Stefanos's empty bed, or the countless others whose stories were never written. Yet their ghosts remain, every echo of footsteps in those corridors, every shadow in the corner of a chamber, carries the memory of boys whose lives were stolen to build an empire's grandeur. The empire is gone, but their silence endures. And so, when we remember the Ottoman Golden Age, its splendor, its power, its glory, we must also remember the price. For every jewel set into the palace walls, there was a child who paid in innocence. For every soldier loyal to the Sultan, there was a family left grieving in a distant village. For every triumph, there was a quiet tragedy buried beneath marble floors. You, the boy who once watched sheep in the misty valleys, represent them all. A life taken, reshaped, and sacrificed on the altar of empire. And though history often forgets the voiceless, your story whispers still. A reminder that the foundations of power are too often built upon the suffering of those who had no choice. The palace may shine with beauty, but behind its walls, the ghosts of children still walk.